Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights on what we think we know about history. So, let the room go quiet. Let the ambient hum of your daily life fade to a whisper. Maybe light a candle, or just let the darkness deepen around you. Imagine you are not just listening, but drifting, like a boat on a calm, ancient sea. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you are right now as these words reach you across the silent spaces. I like to picture these stories stretching like invisible threads, connecting us all from one quiet corner of the night to another. Let's drift into the desert together. Imagine yourself in a quiet, dimly lit room. Not a bustling gallery, but a hidden archive within the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. The air is still, thick with the scent of old paper, dry earth, and the faint, sweet dust of forgotten centuries. You pull on a pair of soft cotton gloves. The light, a single focused beam, falls upon a small, unassuming object. It's a four-sided prism, no larger than your hand, crafted from baked clay. Its surface is covered in tiny, meticulously carved wedge-shaped marks to in cuneiform script, pressed into the wet mud thousands of years ago, before the world we know had even begun to form its first coherent thought. This is the Weld Blundell prism. It doesn't gleam with gold or sparkle with jewels. It is humble, earthy, a muted ochre against the dark wood of the display. Yet in its quiet presence, it holds a truth so vast, so deeply unsettling, that it challenges the very bedrock of our understanding of time and human civilization. Your fingers, protected by the thin cotton, almost feel the ghost of the scribe's hand, the pressure of the reed stylus as it etched these symbols into the soft clay. This isn't just an artifact, it is a meticulously kept record, a king list, a testimony from a world that saw time stretch and bend in ways we can barely comprehend. It's a silent, stubborn witness, daring us to listen to its story, to accept a timeline that seems to defy all logic, all reason. The quiet hum of the museum's climate control system is the only sound, a modern echo against the profound silence of 5 millennia. The prism begins its story not with the hesitant steps of early man, but with a declaration that resonates like a deep, slow drumbeat across the ages. It states, simply and profoundly, when kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. Picture this, not a gradual evolution, not a slow climb out of the primeval mud, but a sudden divine endowment. Kingship, a concept of order and governance, a gift from the celestial realm's Eridu. Whisper the name, it was not merely a city, but the very first city, according to these ancient scribes. Imagine it rising from the flat, fertile plains of Mesopotamia, a cluster of mud, brick dwellings beneath a sky so vast and clear that the stars felt close enough to touch. This wasn't a myth in the way we understand it today, for fanciful tales spun around a campfire. For the people who wrote these words, this was history, their history. A time when the veil between the heavens and the earth was thin, almost transparent. A time when beings they called gods walked among men, teaching them, guiding them, perhaps even ruling them directly. The air in Eridu, according to the whispers carried on the desert wind, was charged with a different kind of energy, a primordial hum. The foundations of its temples, built of sun-baked bricks, reached towards the constellations, not in supplication, but in recognition of their origin. It was a world where the sacred and the mundane were inextricably intertwined, where every sunrise was a reminder of a divine order, and every harvest a testament to celestial wisdom. The narrative isn't about creation from chaos, but about the establishment of order, a system put in place by beings from above, a blueprint for civilization laid out on the freshly tilled earth. And so, the well-de-Blundell prism continues, listing the names of those who first held this divine kingship. The first among them, the one whose name begins this extraordinary lineage, was Alulim. Say his name softly, letting the syllables drift thafti, Alu-Limin. He was the inaugural king of Eridu. Now prepare to let time stretch to feel the fabric of your understanding expand and thin. The prism records that Alulim reigned. Not for a lifetime, not for a century, not even for a millennium. Alulim reigned for Sundi 8,800 years saved. Let that number settle, 28,800 years. Imagine the slow turning of the seasons, the countless cycles of planting and harvest, the generations of men born, living out their brief spans, and returning to the dust, all beneath the unchanging gaze of Alulim. Think of your own life, a flicker in the grand scheme. Think of recorded human history, a few thousand years, barely a blink, and then Alulim reigning for nearly 30 millennia. It's a number that doesn't compute, a duration that defies our very concept of existence. The quiet room, the ancient clay, the tiny cuneiform marks of Phaendi. They present this fact with an unblinking, unwavering certainty. No explanation, no embellishment, just the stark, impossible number. The air seems to thicken with the weight of that time, a vast, silent ocean of years stretching out behind the first king, before the first human thought, as we understand it, truly began to take root. It's a gentle, persistent whisper, suggesting that perhaps, just perhaps, our calendars are far too short, our memories far too fleeting, to grasp the true scale of what once was. You are still holding the prism, feeling its cool weight. The light in this imagined archive is dim, just enough to illuminate the faint script, the deep impressions made by a reed stylus thousands of years ago. We've spoken of Alulim, the first king whose reign stretched for 28,800 years, a number so vast it swallows centuries whole, leaving no trace but the echo of its impossible scale. What does it mean to rule for so long, to witness generations rise and fall, to see civilizations begin and fade, all within the span of a single life? Consider the dust motes dancing in the silent shaft of light that filters through a high window. Each speck is a moment, a life, an era. Now imagine an eternity, compressed into the single, unwavering gaze of a king. Alulim's name, a whisper in the vastness of time, is followed by another. After Alulim, the prism tells us of Alongar, who reigned for 36,000 years. 36,000 years. Try to wrap your mind around that. It is not just a number on a clay tablet. It is a testament to a different kind of time, a different understanding of existence. Was it a slow, deliberate unfolding of events, or a rapid succession of experiences, perceived differently by these ancient beings? The very air around these names feels thick with unanswerable questions, like the heavy, humid air before a distant storm. The names themselves are hypnotic. Alulim, Alongar, each a soft sound, a breath released into the quiet. They are not just rulers. They are anchors in a time so remote, it feels less like history and more like a dream. We drift through these impossible durations, carried by the rhythm of the scribe's hand, the steady, rhythmic pressing of the stylus into the soft, yielding clay. Imagine the quiet dedication of the scribes who copied these lists. They weren't inventing stories. They were preserving what they believed to be a sacred record. Each stroke, each wedge-shaped mark, was an act of reverence, an attempt to hold on to something vast and slipping away. They believed in these numbers and these kings whose lives were longer than the recorded history we know. They saw them not as myths, but as the foundational pillars of their world, the giants upon whose shoulders their own shorter lives were built. The desert wind outside our imaginary archive hums a low, continuous note, a sound that is carried across these lands for millennia. It whispers the names of forgotten cities of kings whose dust is now indistinguishable from the desert floor. But here, in the cool silence, their names are still distinct, still resonant. In Menluana, 43,200 years. The numbers pile up, one upon the other, like ancient stones in a forgotten cairn. Each one a marker, a signpost in a landscape of time that defies human comprehension. What did they see? These kings, what knowledge did they accumulate? Did they watch the stars shift in their slow, majestic dance? Did they chart the cycles of the moon, the turning of the seasons, with an understanding that transcended mere observation? The very idea of such longevity suggests a different relationship with the cosmos, a deeper connection to the rhythms of the universe. Perhaps they weren't just kings. Perhaps they were guardians, overseeing the slow evolution of a nascent world, guiding its first fragile steps. The clay offers no answers, only these stark, unwavering numbers carved with an authority that silences doubt, at least for a moment. The names continue, a litany of the impossibly ancient. In Mengal, Anna ruling for 28,800 years. Dumuzi, the shepherd, for 36,000 years. Each name a doorway into a different kind of eternity. The repetition is not monotonous, it is mesmerizing. It pulls you deeper into the ancient quiet, into a space where the rules of time bend and warp. Think of the patience required to live such a life. The slow accumulation of wisdom, the deep understanding of cause and effect that would come from observing centuries unfold. It's a concept that feels alien to our hurried existence, a quiet challenge to our perception of time as a linear, finite progression. The Sumerian King List, in its simple, direct declaration, expands the very boundaries of what we consider possible. It invites us to consider a world where time was the different currency, measured not in fleeting decades but in epochs. These kings, whose reigns are recorded with such stark precision, are like figures in a dream. They stand at the very edge of human memory, their forms indistinct, their voices lost to the ages. But their numbers, those staggering, impossible numbers, remain. A silent testament to a world that existed before our world. A time when life itself flowed at a different, more majestic pace. The soft rustle of the pages of an imagined book, or the gentle slide of a clay tablet in its protective casing. These are the only sounds that accompany the slow unfolding of these ancient reigns. We are not rushing, we are simply being, allowing the vastness of these numbers to wash over us, dissolving the hurried edges of our own perceptions. This is the era of the long-lived, a time when history breathes slowly, deeply, and without end. The King List continues its steady, unhurried recitation. It speaks of a transfer, a movement of power. Then the kingship was carried to Bnad Tibura. The words themselves carry a weight, a sense of destiny unfolding. Bad Tibura, a name that tastes of ancient dust and the silent strength of old stone. Imagine this city, Bad Tibura, rising from the flat plains of Mesopotamia, perhaps not as grand as the later Uruk, but significant, a focal point for power and knowledge. The name itself, sometimes translated as Fortress of the Metalworkers or Wall of the Coppersmiths, hints at its true nature, its hidden secrets. Picture the air, thick with the smell of charcoal and hot metal. The rhythmic clang of hammer on anvil, if not in the immediate city center, then echoing from workshops beyond the city walls. Yet, in our quiet, sleep-inducing journey, even these sounds are muted, distant, like the memory of work carried out long ago. We don't hear the clamor, we sense the presence of it, the quiet hum of an advanced craft. Here, in Bad Tibura, the kingship descends once more, bringing with it a renewed sense of purpose, a continuation of that impossibly long lineage. For 36,000 years, Enmenluana of Bad Tibura reigned. Then another, Enmengal, and for 28,800 years. And then Dumuzi, the shepherd, for 36,000 years. The numbers repeat, a familiar comforting rhythm, a soft insistence that time, for these beings, was a different entity altogether. What secrets did Bad Tibura hold within its walls? If it was indeed a center for metalworking, then it implies a sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, of extracting raw ore from the earth, of smelting, alloying, and shaping metals, not just for tools and weapons, but perhaps for objects of great ritual significance, or even for technologies we can only dimly imagine. Consider the hands of these ancient artisans, strong, calloused, yet precise, shaping the stubborn metal, coaxing forms from the raw earth. This wasn't simple craftsmanship. This was an art form, a science passed down through generations. And when those generations spanned millennia, the accumulated knowledge, the refinement of technique, would have been extraordinary. Perhaps the long-lived kings of Bad Tibura were not just rulers, but master engineers, master alchemists. Perhaps their longevity granted them the time to truly understand the properties of the earth, the secrets hidden within its strata. They could observe the slow cooling of a molten crucible over centuries, perfecting their craft with a patience that is almost divine. The King List doesn't elaborate on the daily lives of these kings, or the specific advancements of their cities. It offers only names and numbers, stark and unyielding. But the very mention of Bad Tibura ignites a spark of curiosity, a gentle wonder about the hidden depths of this ancient world. It suggests that these impossibly long reigns were not just periods of idle rule, but eras of profound development, guided by a wisdom that transcended the human lifespan. Imagine the glow of a furnace at night, a pulsing heart of light in the ancient darkness. The quiet, focused concentration of individuals who understood the language of fire and earth. The slow, deliberate process of creation, stretching across centuries. This is the atmosphere of Bad Tibura, a place where time was a tool shaped and wielded by those who understood its true nature. The air around you, in this quiet, imagined space, seems to carry the faint, metallic scent of ancient bronze, the cool, earthy smell of clay, and the silent hum of forgotten knowledge. The names of the kings drift past like ancient ships on a calm sea, each one carrying the weight of impossible years, each one a testament to a time when the boundaries of life and leadership were stretched far beyond our modern understanding. The silence of Bad Tibera is not an empty silence. It is a silence filled with the echoes of ancient hammers, the whisper of forgotten incantations, and the slow, steady rhythm of creation unfolding across epochs. The kings of Bad Tibera, with their monumental reigns, oversaw a world where the very elements of the earth were tamed and transformed, guided by hands that had known countless generations. Let your mind drift with the names: Menlu, Ana, and Men, Gal, Ana, Dumuzi the shepherd, each one a thread in the vast tapestry of pre-Diluvian time, each one a guardian of secrets whispered only in the quietest hours of the night. The whispers tell of a time when kings were more than men, when their lives were measured not in years, but in the slow, deliberate turning of the cosmic clock. The drone of the long reigns, the steady rhythm of names and numbers, stretches on, lulling you deeper into the ancient quiet. The cities rise and fall in the mind's eye, each one a beacon of impossibly long rule, each one a repository of forgotten knowledge. We drift from Eridu to Bad Tibera, carried on the slow currents of pre-Diluvian time. And then the King List delivers its stark, unavoidable truth. A single profound sentence that shatters the rhythm that washes away all that came before. Then the flood swept over. The words hang in the air, heavy and absolute. Imagine the sound of it. Not the gentle patter of rain, but the relentless rising roar of water. The world, which had been so solid, so eternal in its long-lived kings, suddenly becomes fluid, uncertain. The very ground beneath their feet, the walls of their cities, the carefully inscribed clay tablets signed E, all threatened by an indifferent, overwhelming force. The silence in our imagined space deepens, but it is a new kind of silence. A silence that hums with the memory of a colossal sound, a sound that swallowed all others. The sound of water, endless water. Picture the sky, no longer filled with the familiar steady stars, but with a churning, bruised darkness. The rain begins, not as individual drops, but as a solid sheet, a continuous curtain descending from the heavens. It falls relentlessly for days, for weeks, perhaps for months. The land, dry and cracked from millennia of sun, quickly softens, then saturates, then disappears beneath the rising tide. The cities, which seemed so permanent, so rooted in their vast histories, begin to dissolve. The mud, brick walls, the very substance of Sumerian architecture, turn back into the earth from which they came. The geometric shapes of Uruk, the fortified gates of Bad Tibera, all blur and soften under the relentless assault of the water. The King List offers no emotional commentary, no lament, only the cold, factual statement. Then the flood swept over. This calm, almost detached reporting of a cosmic catastrophe makes it all the more chilling, all the more real in its understated power. It speaks of an event so immense, so utterly transformative, that it needed no embellishment. Its mere mention carries the weight of total obliteration. The water didn't just cover the land, it reset the clock. It wiped the slate clean. All the accumulated wisdom of those impossibly long reigns, all the secrets of metalworking, all the astronomical observations, all the names and numbers etched into clay for a time, they were lost beneath the waves. The world becomes a vast, unbroken expanse of churning water, reflecting a sky that offers no comfort. There is no distinction between land and sea, no horizon, just the endless, shifting surface of a global ocean. And beneath it, in the deep, cold darkness, lie the submerged remnants of a civilization that had known time in a way we cannot fathom. Feel the profound stillness that follows such an event. The world, after the last drop of rain has fallen, after the last wave has crashed, is utterly silent, a silence born of complete devastation. The air is heavy, damp, smelling of ancient mud, and the quiet resignation of a world made new, born again from the depths. This is the Great Interruption, a punctuation mark in the grand narrative of Sumer, a moment when the flow of history as recorded on the prism ceases. The long-lived kings, their vast wisdom, their impossible centuries, Hindi, all are swept away, becoming legends whispered on the few high peaks that might have remained, or memories carried in the terrified hearts of survivors. The water recedes slowly, leaving behind a world transformed. A world stripped bare, reshaped, cleansed. The land emerges, scarred and reborn, a canvas waiting for a new beginning. But the memory of the flood, the trauma of the Great Interruption, would forever be etched into the collective consciousness of humanity. It would become the ultimate dividing line, the boundary between what was and what would be. The quiet, almost whispered words of the scribe, "Then the flood swept over, carry the weight of all that was lost." The silence that follows is not just the absence of sound. It is the presence of an immense, profound emptiness, a space where an entire epoch vanished beneath the waves. Let that silence wash over you, a gentle wave carrying away the last remnants of thought, leaving only the quiet breath of the present moment. The world has been reset, and we too can let go, drifting into the quiet aftermath. Then the flood swept over. The memory of it etched into the collective consciousness feels like a deep, cold scar on the face of the earth. Picture the water rising, not with a sudden, violent burst, but with an inexorable, patient crawl. It swallowed the lowlands first, then crept up the ziggurats, silencing the bustling markets, seeping into the cool, dark sanctuaries. The very air would have grown heavy, thick with moisture and the scent of turning earth. Imagine the sound, not just the roar of a deluge, but the softer, more insidious sound of everything becoming saturated. The rustle of reeds turning to a soggy whisper, the creak of timber giving way, the slow, relentless erosion of clay. The world as they knew it dissolved, its boundaries blurred, its landmarks submerged. The King List, with its impossibly long reigns, simply states, "Then the flood swept over." After the flood had swept over and the kingship had descended from heaven a second time, kingship was in Kish. A new beginning, a reset, but a reset that carries the ghost of what was lost. The water didn't just cover the land, it cleansed it, stripped it bare, leaving behind a vast, flat canvas of mud. And from this mud, life began again, cautiously. The first green shoots pushing through the silt, the slow return of birds, the tentative rebuilding of shelters. But the memory, even if unspoken, lingered in the taste of the air, the feel of the damp earth beneath their feet. Kingship, that divine spark, descended once more. Not to Eridu, the first city by the southern marshes, but to Kish, a city further north, a new focal point for a world trying to re-establish its order. The very act of kingship descending, a second time, carries the weight of a profound interruption, a cosmic pause. It's an acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted, that the previous era, with its impossibly long-lived rulers, had been irrevocably severed by the waters, and with the new reign in Kish, a subtle, yet profound change is recorded. The lifespans, while still astonishing by human standards, are dramatically curtailed. No longer are we speaking of tens of thousands of years. Now the numbers, though still vast, begin to feel a little more constrained. A king might rule for 1,200 years, another for 900. Imagine that, 1,000 years, a millennium, to live through 1,000 harvests, 1,000 cycles of the moon, to see generations of your descendants rise and fall, to witness the slow geological shift of the landscape. It is still a stretch of time that dwarfs our modern imaginations, but it hints at a diminishing return, a subtle dilution of the potency that once allowed for reigns of 28,800 years. This decreasing process, this gradual shortening of the reigns, whispers of a fading echo. Perhaps the divine essence, once so potent, was now spread thinner, diluted by the vastness of the flood, by the trauma of the reset. Or perhaps the connection to the source of that longevity was weakened. The kingship still descended from heaven, but it carried less of the ancient, primal energy. It is like a battery slowly losing its charge, or a distant star whose light, though still visible, has traveled across too many light years to retain its original brilliance. The names themselves begin to shift, too. They are still foreign, ancient, but they carry a different resonance. The scribes, carefully pressing their reeds into the wet clay, were documenting not just a list of rulers, but a chronicle of humanity's slow, reluctant journey away from the direct presence of the divine. They were tracing the receding tide of an era where gods walked among men, marking the points where the extraordinary began to give way, ever so subtly, to the merely exceptional. The reigns in Kish, though shorter, still paint a picture of stability that transcends our understanding. 1,000 years of continuous rule. Think of the wisdom accumulated, the traditions solidified, the sheer depth of institutional memory that such a reign would foster. Cities would rise and fall within a single king's lifetime. Rivers would change their course. Mountains would slowly erode, and the king, a silent, enduring presence, would watch it all, a living bridge between epochs. It is a testament to a different kind of time, a slower, more deliberate rhythm of existence, where change was a glacial process, and memory stretched back not merely generations, but millennia. The very act of listing these names and numbers, in their rhythmic, repetitive cadence, becomes a kind of lullaby, a chant that slowly dissolves the sharp edges of modern time, allowing your mind to drift on the currents of these ancient, unfathomable durations. Among these post-Diluvian kings, emerging from the mists of the King List, is a name that resonates with a particular kind of longing, Etana. He is listed as the 13th king of Kish, ruling for 1,560 years. A shepherd, the King List calls him, who ascended to heaven, consolidated all the foreign lands, and had no rival. Imagine Etana, a king who was once a shepherd. Feel the rough wool of the sheep under your fingers, the dust of the plains on your skin, the silence of the night broken only by the bleating of the flock and the distant howl of a jackal. He understood the rhythms of the earth, the cycles of life and death, the vast, indifferent expanse of the night sky. And yet, this shepherd king, perhaps more than any before him, felt the profound emptiness left by the flood, the absence of the truly long-lived, the yearning for something that had been lost. The King List is terse, almost dismissive of the extraordinary. Etana, a shepherd who ascended to heaven. But the story, preserved in other ancient texts, unfurls with a breathtaking sweep. Etana, it is said, desperately desired an heir. His wife was barren, and so he sought a remedy, a plant of birth that could only be found in the heavens. Picture the scene. Etana, a man of the earth, a king burdened by his mortality, finds an eagle. Not just any eagle, but a magnificent, ancient creature. An eagle that had been punished by the gods and lay wounded in a pit. Etana, with the compassion of a shepherd, nursed the eagle back to health, and in return the eagle offered to carry him to the heavens. Close your eyes. Feel the strong, feathered back of the eagle beneath you. The initial jolt as it pushes off from the earth. The rush of wind against your face, cold and exhilarating. The ground recedes, shrinking rapidly beneath you. The scattered huts of Kish become tiny specks. The winding rivers thin silver ribbons. You are rising higher and higher through layers of clouds that feel like cool, damp silk brushing against your skin. There is a profound sense of weightlessness. The world, with all its worries, its earthly concerns, its gravity, falls away. You are no longer bound by the soil, by the slow progression of time on the ground. You are drifting, soaring, carried by the powerful, rhythmic beat of the eagle's wings. The air grows thinner, colder, cleaner. The sounds of the earth fade into a distant hum, then into silence. All you hear is the whisper of the wind, the soft rustle of the eagle's feathers, and perhaps the slow, steady beat of your own heart. Look down. The earth is a vast, curved expanse. The oceans are deep, shimmering blues, the land a mosaic of greens and browns. You can see the geometric patterns of cities, like tiny, intricate carvings on a colossal sphere. The rivers, once mighty and imposing, now look like delicate veins across the skin of the world. It's a perspective that shifts everything, making human endeavors seem both monumental and utterly minuscule. This flight, this ascent into the vastness of the sky, is a journey not just through space, but through consciousness. It's an escape from the limitations of the earthly realm, a quest for something beyond the ordinary. Etana, the shepherd king, was reaching for a piece of that ancient pre-flood power, that divine essence that once allowed for such impossible lifespans. He wasn't just seeking an heir, he was seeking a connection, a way to bridge the gap between the diminished world after the flood and the glorious, long-lived past. The story tells of his journey through the heavens, past the gates of Ishtar, to the throne of Anu, the supreme god. He sought the plant of birth, a symbol of fertility, of renewal, of a return to the abundance and vitality that seemed to have been lost. The details of his ultimate success or failure vary in the fragmented tablets, some suggesting he found the plant, others that he was too afraid to complete the journey, or that he eventually returned to Earth, having merely glimpsed the divine realm. But the significance lies in the act itself. A human king, even a long-lived one, daring to ascend to the heavens, to seek answers and solutions from the gods. It speaks to a profound yearning, a recognition that after the flood, humanity was left with a diminished inheritance, and that the path to reclaiming it might lie not in the earth, but in the sky. This image of floating, of transcending the earthly plane, is a powerful one for drifting into sleep. Let the feeling of weightlessness envelop you. Let the vastness of the sky stretch out before your mind's eye, and let the rhythmic beat of the eagle's wings carry you further and further into a state of deep relaxation. The King List continues its steady march through the post-Diluvian dynasties, a chronicle of names and numbers, each one a faint echo of a distant past. And then, a name appears that vibrates with a different kind of energy, a name that has transcended the dusty clay tablets and carved itself into the very bedrock of human storytelling, Gilgamesh. He is listed as the 5th king of the first dynasty of Uruk, ruling for a seemingly modest 126 years. Modest, that is, when compared to the 28,800 years of Alulim, or the 1,560 years of Etana. Yet, 126 years is still an extraordinary span for any human ruler. It places him at a crucial juncture, a boundary point where the impossibly long, almost divine reigns begin to give way to durations that, while still remarkable, edge closer to what we might, with a generous stretch, consider human Gilgamesh. The name itself conjures images of massive walls, heroic strength, and a profound existential quest. He is the king of Uruk, a city that, even in ruins today, impresses with the sheer scale of its ancient architecture, its broken geometric shapes rising from the desert floor like the bones of a titan. Imagine Uruk in its prime, a sprawling metropolis, protected by walls so formidable that they were said to have been built by Gilgamesh himself, a testament to his power and his people's ambition. He stands as a bridge, a liminal figure. On one side, the hazy, godlike kings of pre-flood antiquity, ruling for millennia, almost immortal. On the other, the ever-shortening lifespans of human kings, accelerating towards the familiar brevity of our own existence. Gilgamesh, with his 126-year reign, is perhaps the last echo of that ancient long-lived lineage, before humanity fully embraced its mortality. His story, immortalized in the Epic of Gilgamesh, is a direct reflection of this boundary. It is a tale steeped in the fear of death, a primal terror that seems to have gripped him after the loss of his beloved companion, Enkidu, having lived for over a century, having experienced power, glory, and the adoration of his people, Gilgamesh confronts the inevitable, the one thing even his immense strength cannot overcome, mortality. Consider the kings before him. They ruled for thousands of years. Did they fear death in the same way? Or was death a concept so distant, so alien, that it barely registered in their consciousness? Gilgamesh, however, feels the cold breath of oblivion. He embarks on a desperate journey to find Utnapishtim, the only man to have survived the great flood and been granted immortality by the gods. He seeks the plant of everlasting life, a direct parallel to Etana's quest for the plant of birth. Both kings, separated by dynasties and perhaps centuries, were reaching for a lost connection, a way to restore the long life that once seemed to be humanity's birthright. The King List, in its stark factual presentation, sends a strange kind of historical weight to this epic. It suggests that Gilgamesh was not merely a mythical figure, but a king whose reign, though still impossibly long by our standards, marked a significant turning point. He was a king who knew what had been lost. He was a king who lived in the shadow of the flood, and in the fading memory of those who ruled for ages. His quest for immortality, therefore, becomes not just a personal struggle, but a collective human yearning to reclaim a past when life was longer, when the divine was closer, when the fear of death was perhaps less acute. The scribes who meticulously copied these lists, generation after generation, were not just recording history, they were preserving a memory, a belief system. For them, Gilgamesh was not just a hero of myth, but a real king whose reign, though shorter than his predecessors, was still of a duration that set him apart. He was a figure who stood at the crossroads, looking back at the long-lived giants, and forward into an uncertain future where human life would become increasingly fleeting. His 126 years are a whisper of the ages, a fading echo of the time before. Yet within those years he forged a legend that would outlast empires. He wrestled with gods, built mighty walls, and ultimately confronted the universal human condition. The King List gives him a precise timestamp, anchoring him, however loosely, to the realm of recorded history, making his epic quest not just a fantastic tale, but a profound reflection on the limits of human existence as understood by the ancient Sumerians. He is the boundary, the point where the unfathomable begins to touch the recognizable, where the divine recedes and humanity, with its triumphs and its sorrows, truly begins to find its voice in the vast, silent stretches of time. Imagine for a moment the scribes in Uruk, their fingers stained with clay, not just recording history, but perhaps grappling with a system of numbers that could stretch and shrink time in ways we now struggle to comprehend. We look at numbers like 28,800 years, and our modern minds immediately flag it as impossible, a myth, a fantasy. But what if the impossibility lies not in the events themselves, but in our interpretation of their ancient mathematical language? The Sumerians, these brilliant, enigmatic people, didn't count like us. They didn't think in tens. Their world, their very understanding of quantity, was built on a sexagesimal system, Thindi, a base -60 system. Think of it. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. We still carry fragments of their genius in our daily lives, and echoes of a time when the number 60 was fundamental to measurement, to astronomy, to the very fabric of their ordered universe. Consider how this might warp our perception of their king list. What if these vast numbers, these seemingly fantastical reigns, are not literal years as we understand them, but rather a different unit of time, a different way of measuring existence, scaled by their base -60 system? Ancient Mesopotamian scribes used specific units for very large numbers. There was the Suvisars, which was 3,660 times 60 years. There was the Thung Nershi, which was 600 years, and the Thongdi, which was 3,600, and the Songage, which was 60. These weren't arbitrary figures. They were integral to their astronomical calculations, their sophisticated understanding of the cosmos. When they spoke of the cycles of celestial bodies, of the long periods between conjunctions of planets, they were thinking in these sexagesimal units. So, when the King List speaks of a Lulam reigning for 28,800 years, what if this number, in its ancient context, translates to something else entirely? What if it is not 28,800 time solar years, but 28,800 units of a different kind? Perhaps 28,800 tundra, which would be 28,800 times 60, or 172800 years. That doesn't make it shorter, does it? It makes it even longer, even more mind-bending. But let's try another angle. What if the scribes in their meticulous copying were transcribing not literal years, but a different kind of cyclical measurement? Imagine a time when the concept of a year as Earth's orbit around the sun was understood differently, or perhaps was merely one of many cycles they tracked. The cycles of the moon, the cycles of Venus as it traces its pentagram in the sky, the precession of the equinox's cycle, spanning 25,920 years. These were not secrets to the Sumerians. Their ziggurats were observatories, their priests astronomers of incredible precision. Perhaps the numbers in the King List refer to these grand cosmic cycles, not to the brief lifespan of a human king. A reign of 28,800 years could be 80 side, 8 times 3,600, 8 grand cycles of a celestial event. This would transform the King List from a chronological record of human rulers into something far more profound. A cosmic calendar, a record of epochal shifts, written in the language of the stars themselves. The cool, dry clay beneath your fingertips holds these mysteries. The impressions of the stylus are precise, deliberate. The scribes were not careless. They were recording what they believed to be truth, a truth perhaps encoded in a mathematical language we have largely forgotten how to speak. The weight of these numbers, the sheer scale of them, can feel heavy in the quiet of the night. It is a different kind of burden, a mathematical one, a puzzle etched in mud, waiting for our modern minds to unpick its ancient logic. The rhythm of these calculations, the counting in base -60, the multiplication and division by factors of 60, it creates a quiet hum in the mind, a gentle persistent drone of numbers stretching back into the very dawn of time, or perhaps the very dawn of a different way of keeping time. Let the numbers drift through your thoughts, not as concrete facts, but as whispers of possibility. 28,800, 36,000, 43,200. The multiplication of 60. The division by 60. The way these numbers resonate with ancient astronomy, with the cycles of the heavens. It is a different kind of history, a history written in the language of the cosmos, then translated perhaps imperfectly into the language of kings. The idea that the King List is a complex mathematical cipher, a record of celestial events disguised as human reigns, offers a peculiar comfort. It rationalizes the impossible, yet leaves the door open to an even grander, more sophisticated understanding of the Sumerians. It suggests they were not just inventing stories, but encoding knowledge, preserving it for a future that might one day learn to read their cosmic script. The cool, quiet precision of mathematics. The silent turning of gears in an ancient, invisible clock. Each number a step, each unit a measure of something vast and unknowable, yet meticulously recorded on a small, unassuming piece of clay. Let the steady rhythm of these possibilities, these calculations, lull your mind into a state of quiet contemplation. The universe, measured in sars and ners, slowly turning. But what if there is no mathematical error? What if the numbers are not a code for celestial cycles, but a literal record? What if the earliest kings, those who reigned for tens of thousands of years, were not human as we understand humanity today? This is where the whispers begin to grow louder, where the King List takes on a different, more unsettling resonance. This is where the Anunnaki enter the story. The Sumerian texts themselves speak of beings who descended from heaven. They speak of the Anunnaki, a pantheon of gods who were deeply involved in the creation of humanity, in the establishment of civilization. These were not distant, ethereal deities. They walked among men, they taught them agriculture, irrigation, writing, and the very concept of kingship. The King List states, after kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. This phrase itself is loaded with meaning. It doesn't cite kingship was invented in Eridu. It says it twine descended, descendi, as if it was an import, a technology, a system brought from elsewhere, and who brought it? The Anunnaki. Consider the descriptions of the Anunnaki in other Sumerian texts. They are often depicted as powerful, long-lived, sometimes appearing with wings or unusual features. They were associated with specific celestial bodies. Nana, Sin with the moon, Utu Shamash, with the sun, Inanna Ishtar with Venus. Their very names echo through the cosmos. If these early kings were indeed Anunnaki, or perhaps their direct descendants, demigods, then their extraordinary lifespans suddenly become less a myth and more a characteristic. If they were beings from another place, with a different biological clock, a different understanding of time, then 28,800 years might simply be a typical reign for one of their kind. Think of it not as magic, but as biology. Imagine a species with a vastly extended lifespan, whose metabolism operates at a different pace. For them, 1,000 years might feel like a human decade. A reign of 28,800 years could be a perfectly normal productive period for overseeing the establishment of a nascent civilization, for guiding humanity through its earliest, most formative stages. The texts describe the Anunnaki as engineers rather than sorcerers. They built cities, dug canals, established laws. They were hands-on, and they created humanity not with a wave of a wand, but through a process described in the Thudi Enuma Elishi and other creation myths involving the mixing of clay, blood, and divine essence. A careful, deliberate experiment like quality control. Perhaps the King List is not just a list of rulers, but a record of successive Anunnaki overseers, each one holding the reins of power for a period equivalent to many human generations, guiding the development of the first human cities. Their longevity would provide the continuity, the stability needed to establish complex societies from scratch. Imagine the wisdom accumulated over tens of thousands of years. The long-term planning, the deep understanding of celestial mechanics, and then the flood, the great interruption. Then the flood swept over, and kingship was taken to heaven. Another descent, another transfer of power. But after the deluge, the reigns of the kings shortened dramatically. The King List moves from tens of thousands of years to thousands, then to hundreds, then to decades. What does this signify? Perhaps the Anunnaki themselves were less present after the flood. Perhaps their direct lineage became diluted. Or perhaps humanity, having proven its ability to survive, was gradually given more autonomy, with less direct intervention from its long-lived mentors. The shortening lifespans could reflect the transition from divine rule to human rule, a slow, inevitable handover of responsibility. The idea of the Anunnaki, these ancient astronauts or advanced beings, is a powerful one. It resonates with a deep human longing to understand our origins, to explain the inexplicable leaps in ancient technology and knowledge. It's a quiet possibility that lingers in the shadows of the museum archives, a question whispered in the desert wind. The clay tablets don't argue, they simply present the data, the numbers, the names, the descent from heaven, the long, long reigns, and the abrupt change after the flood. It is a narrative that, when viewed through the lens of the Anunnaki hypothesis, begins to make a different kind of sense. A sense that challenges our conventional understanding of history, of evolution, and of our place in the cosmic order. Let this thought drift, light as a feather, across the landscape of your mind. The possibility of ancient architects, long-lived guardians, shaping the earliest chapters of our story. Their presence, a silent force etched into the very foundation of civilization. A legacy not of myth, but of memory. A memory embedded in the quiet words of the King List. Now, let's leave the hushed archives, the intricate mathematics, and the tantalizing hypotheses behind. Let's drift back to the present moment, to the vast, silent expanse of the Iraqi desert. Picture it, the endless, undulating dunes, stretching under a sky so dark and clear that the stars blaze with an ancient intensity, just as they did 5 millennia ago. Beneath that same sky, where the Tigris and Euphrates once nurtured the cradle of civilization, now lie only mounds. Eridu, the first city, where kingship descended from heaven, is now just a series of tell-surthy layers of accumulated dust, mud brick, and forgotten dreams. A gentle breeze whispers across these silent ruins, carrying the scent of dry earth and the weight of untold centuries. All the rains, all the thousands of years, all the wisdom, all the power Thaurin, it has all returned to the dust from which it came. The long-lived kings, the fleeting human rulers, the Anunnaki, the scribes with their stylus, the builders of ziggurats. Their stories are now just echoes carried on the wind, absorbed by the sand. The King List, in its silent testimony, reminds us of the profound cycle of existence, of beginnings and endings, of power ascending and descending, of civilizations rising and falling like the sun and moon over the ancient plains. Each word pressed into clay was an attempt to defy this inevitable return to silence, a desperate plea for remembrance. But in the end, even the most enduring records become part of the earth again. The cool clay, once vibrant with meaning, now rests, a silent witness to the passage of immeasurable time. The great flood came and went, kingship descended and ascended, and the desert remained timeless and different, holding its secrets close. The pursuit of answers, the unraveling of ancient mysteries, is a journey of the mind. But sometimes in the deepest quiet, the greatest wisdom lies in simply letting go. Letting go of the need to understand every number, to explain every anomaly, to simply be present with the mystery itself. Feel the quiet of the desert night settle around you, the vastness of the sky above, the endless stretch of sand below, the gentle breath of the wind, like the soft turning of the pages of history. All the questions, all the wonder, all the weight of time, slowly softening, slowly fading. Let your thoughts drift like the dust motes in a beam of moonlight, unburdened, peaceful. The long reigns of kings, the ancient numbers, the celestial rhythms, they are simply sounds now, soft and distant. The King List has told its story, and now it is time for your own story to unfold in the quiet landscape of your dreams. Release the pursuit of understanding. Release the need to know. Just breathe. Feel the gentle pull of sleep, like the soft current of an ancient river, carrying you deeper into the quiet night. The sand whispers, the stars watch, and all the history of the world settles into a profound, peaceful silence. Good night, sleep now. Let the quiet embrace you. The desert sleeps, and so do you.